Oh, hi there. Welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Today we're going to read a story from a man named Lucian Pavel, a story from his childhood back under communism in here. It seems to me that these kinds of stories need to be aired more and also need to be aired in English, because it seems that more and more people today just seem to be purposefully forgetting what communism actually meant to the peoples of Eastern Europe and what communism really is at the end of the day, regardless of the rhetoric propagated by various ideologues throughout the planet. So we're gonna read it. Before start reading it, I should probably let you know that there are two terms used in there. The first one is Securitate, which is essentially the Romanian equivalent of the Stasi, and the second one is militia, which is the name that the police carried back in the days until 1989, because under communist ideology there is no such thing as police. They're all militant militias who maintain the socialist order. So that's why the police station was called the militia back in the days. So with that being said, also I should probably let you know we're going to put the text in Romanian on the screen, and I'm gonna translate in real time in English in audio. So there we go. So this is the article. Okay, the article is called "The Sad Childhood Under Communism" by Lucian Pavel, published on Clubul Libertății, which is a website called the Liberty Club, a website dedicated to freedom-oriented content in here. And it goes like this. Because I'm seeing more and more Romanians who are in an almost literal amnesia, unknowing or even ill-intended of the truth regarding the nightmare lived by these people in the communist gulag, and to the request of my son, who had an essay to write for the history class, I'm now starting a series in which I shall expose my deep and scarring memories from that time. Not because I'm some sort of hater, but because I am convinced that the peoples who don't know their horrors and mistakes of their history are at the risk of repeating them. Making a mistake is part of being human. By persevering into making mistakes is pure stupidity. My first sad memory from the communist epoch comes from when I was a young boy, no more than 6 or 7 years old, in the 70s, when I was stoically waiting for the few bananas that my parents could procure from the socialist commerce. I was waiting them to ripen after putting them up on the wardrobe, because, you see, the bananas, besides from being very rare in the commerce, they were almost always green, unripe, and thus uneatable. I was salivating for several days, maybe even 1 up to 2 weeks, until I could enjoy those delicious fruits. The oranges were usually ripe, but they were also rare and difficult to find. As for mandarins and other tropical fruits like pineapples or mango, those I had only read about in books or in the very few French communist magazines PIF that I could get. I've also heard about these mysterious fruits from the television at the show Teleencyclopedia, the Saturday night show about science, geography and history. I felt these shortages throughout my childhood and adolescence, periods which coincided with the harsh years of purposeful starvation of the populace and deprivation of the most elementary needs. Like any other child, I liked cartoons and movies aimed at children, but I didn't get too much of those either because the national TV station only had 2 hours a day of program and 99% of it was dedicated to the communist propaganda, plumper lauds to the great accomplishments of the regime, and so on. At times, they would allow 5 or 10 minutes of cartoons, the same episode on and on of locally produced Mihaela, Miaunel and Bălănel, and Polish productions Lolek and Bolek, and of course the Soviet cartoons of Soyuz film No Zаяc Nie Pagadi. On Sundays, when the program was longer, they would provide propaganda with pioneers with red ties and Stahanovit Communist Youth League norm breakers. And amongst this whole tableau, there would slip some movies like All Sails Up, which was a TV show based on a 1954 Romanian novel, or some foreign movies with animals. All these were carefully checked by the Securitate in order to avoid slipping anything that might inform the children on how people lived in the free, non-communist world, or how children of the putrid capitalists would grow up. Putrid capitalists was a term with which the official propaganda would define the non-communist world, the world beyond the Iron Curtain imposed by the USSR to the peoples of Eastern Europe at the end of World War II. The music that we could access was also carefully filtered by the Securitate, and abundant local music was delivered, but only a few commercial bands, and those were of a questionable quality, as their lyrics were carefully tracked so they don't contain referrals to the East-West conflict or mentions of sexuality, which was a taboo in those times. But still, with a lot of effort, one could find some Beatles, AC/DC or Queen, and the Romanian rock music had already been crushed by the totalitarian censorship of the regime. Phoenix, the most loved local rock band, was now only listened in samizdat format on some magnetic tapes that were borrowed from one person to another, while taking care not to be discovered by those who would turn us into the Securitate for subversive activity. Some had even more suffering to endure because they were openly metalheads and had long hair and wore blue jeans, a way of clothing that was non-conforming with the standards imposed by the regime. One exception though, the children of the apparatchiks and the nomenclatura. They could do whatever they pleased, no one would bother them. When I turned 12, the nightmare of harsh shortages commenced. Even the most basic necessities became hard to find. Me and my brother had to wake up very early in the morning to get a good standing in the queue at the food store in order to access the quote-unquote right to buy for my family 1 liter of kitchen oil and 1 kilogram of sugar. We would take turns on the queue, the parents and the children, but in many instances we ended up queuing for nothing because all the merchandise brought was already sold before we got there, sold through the back of the store to the relatives and of the vendors, or traded for other products that were even harder to find, like gas for cars, color TV sets, and so on and so forth. Everything was subjected to trafficking, and most people couldn't get access to a lot of products unless somehow the traffickers forgot about them. The greatest frustration occurred to me when I was walking with the son of a Securitate officer to the pool that was at the Securitate headquarters in the Copo area. That's when I found out about the special stores from where the apparatchiks would shop. Those stores were filled with all the goodies all the time. Similar stores existed for the Communist Party activists and party officials. The contradiction between what I was seeing on TV and listening to the official radio stations and the reality in the food stores was huge. Whilst the propaganda media was reporting record harvests and a thriving zootechnical industry, people would queue for kilometers to get bread or second-rated meat products or milk. Make no mistakes, those who managed the stores had their share of guilt for these shortages, but they weren't the main guilty ones. The shortages were a direct consequence of the starvation plan made by the single party. And, as we know, or should know, shortages generate contraband, especially shortages of basic products. The media at first was airing documentaries with those caught engaging in contraband, or with old people who would queue for the entire day in order to stockpile products that they would then trade for other products that were harder to find. These documentaries didn't have the effect of stopping the phenomenon through shame. On the contrary, the phenomenon took over the entire society, from the top to bottom. I used to go often to my grandparents, who also lived in the same city, and I was often staying right next to my grandpa with our ears stuck on the radio listening to Radio Free Europe. That's how I learned what was going on in the free world and why were all the hardships of the Ceausescu regime were occurring. It was there when I listened on the Sunday mornings to the good music from the West on the radio segment called Metronom. It was also from Radio Free Europe where I found out about the sufferings of the pre-communist Romanian intellectual elite who were systematically exterminated in political prisons. Radio Free Europe also informed me on the Chernobyl accident and many other events and realities that formed my profound anti-communist orientation. When the communist celebrations were getting close, the pupils and students were caught in a nightmare with all the repetitions for the parades and reverential spectacles dedicated to the supreme leader, regardless of the weather. We were kept outside for hours in order for everything to be perfectly staged under the zealous party activist supervision. The shortages in fuel made the public transportation to be so rare and chaotic that after hours of waiting in stations, some workers would literally climb on a tramway's buggers or ride the bus on the stairs, moves that would endanger their lives. Also, because of the lack of fuel, there was also the aberrant decree of restricting the circulation of cars on Sundays depending on their license plates. The odd-numbered plates were allowed one Sunday and the even-numbered ones in the next Sunday. And if you can imagine, these kinds of decrees with Sunday cars was also proposed in Paris, France. Amazing. Anyway, back to the article. What marked me the most was the regime's endless struggle against the Romanian traditions, which aimed to uproot and dull us as a people. In 1986 or 87, I don't remember the year exactly, me and my friends had established to go in the Christmas Eve night to sing carols to our relatives and other people we knew. We met downtown, from where we were supposed to start walking around the place to all the people we had in mind to sing carols to. But some revealed our plans to the Securitates, so out of the blue the militia stopped us and started asking questions. They wanted to know where we were going with the guitar and with the sheets of paper on which we had Christian carols typewritten using the typewriter that belonged to the parents of one of the teens in our group. After some arguing, they confiscated our sheets and our guitar and told us to come with our parents to the precinct to recover them. After some more arguing and begging, and after promising to go home and stop singing carols, they gave our guitar back, but they destroyed the sheets of paper with the text. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented level of rage, and ever since I hated with all my heart everything that regime meant. Of course, we still went around and sang carols, but looking back, that was a hazardous move, because they could have followed us, and that would have created a ton of problems to our parents. There are many more aspects from that period and that need to be said, but I'll leave them for the next episode. Right. So, I don't know what to put it. This is what communism actually meant, and I'm looking forward for Mr. Lucian Pavel to write his second episode, and we're going to bring the second episode in here, and the third, and how many of them he will write, we're going to bring them all here, and I hope you enjoyed it. These kinds of stories need more airtime as far as I'm concerned. And with that being said, don't forget to click the subscribe button and consider supporting this channel through Patreon. Links in the low bar, also link in the low bar with the original story. Thanks for watching.